May 11, 2019. St. Anthony Hospital, Lakewood, Colorado. Thomas Silverstein is dying. He's 67 years old. It's the first time he's been outside a prison cell in 36 years. For 3 decades, he lived in an 80-square-foot concrete box. No windows. Lights on 24 hours a day. No human contact. Guards refused to speak to him. He ate alone. Exercised alone in a cage. Slept alone under constant camera surveillance. 36 years in total isolation. It's almost more humane to kill someone immediately than it is to intentionally bury a man alive, Silverstein once wrote. Now he's free, but only because he's dying. His death on May 11, 2019, was his only escape from ADX Florence, America's Supermax prison, the place they call worse than death. But here's the question that haunts everyone. Was this justice, or was this torture? Before he died, Silverstein said one thing about his 36 years in solitary. But first, you need to understand what he did to end up there. Before we dive into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This video will make you question everything about justice, punishment, and whether any human deserves what happened to Thomas Silverstein. We're going deep into ADX Florence, the prison former wardens call torture. Now, let's see how Silverstein became the man in the concrete box. Before we tell the story, here are the 5 questions you need answered. 1. What did Thomas Silverstein do to deserve 36 years in solitary? 2. What does ADX Florence actually do to your mind? 3. Why did prison officials say they had no choice but to make his life a living hell? 4. Did 36 years of torture change him or break him? 5. And the big one, was this justice or something far worse? Stick around, because the answers will shock you. It all started with 3 murders. Thomas Silverstein is 26 years old. He's sentenced to 15 years for armed robbery, 3 bank robberies with his father and cousin. 15 years. Not life. Not death. Just 15 years. He could have served his time quietly. Been released in his early 40s. Built a life. But Thomas Silverstein made a different choice. He joined the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, a white supremacist organization, one of the most violent gangs in federal prison. And they had a job for him. Murder number 1, Danny Atwell. Silverstein stabbed him for refusing to smuggle heroin. Murder number 2, Raymond Cadillac Smith, leader of the D.C. Blacks gang. Silverstein and another inmate stabbed him over 60 times, then dragged his body around the unit as a message. Murder number 3, prison guard Merle Klutz, age 51. October 22, 1983. Silverstein removed his handcuffs, broke free from his escort, and stabbed Klutz 40 times. 3 men. Dead. 1 conviction was later overturned, but by then, Silverstein had already killed a guard. When a prisoner kills a guard, what's the right punishment? Death penalty or something else? Micro cliffhanger. The prison system had a problem. They couldn't execute Silverstein, so they did something worse. The decision that changed everything. After killing guard Merle Klutz, Bureau of Prisons Director Norman Carlson issued an order. Thomas Silverstein would have no human contact. A BOP official later explained the reasoning to author Pete Early. We can't execute Silverstein, so we have no choice but to make his life a living hell. Otherwise, other inmates will kill guards, too. There has to be some supreme punishment. Every convict knows what Silverstein is going through. We want them to realize that if they cross the same line that he did, they will pay a heavy price. This wasn't rehabilitation. This was revenge. Thomas Silverstein would spend the rest of his life buried alive in concrete. First stop, a windowless cell deep underground in Atlanta. Silverstein is transferred to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. He's placed in a windowless cell deep underground, about the size of a king-size mattress. He's allowed to wear only underwear. No clothes. A bright light buzzes over his head 24 hours a day. He's denied social visits. No phone calls. His only reading material is a Bible. For 4 years, this is his entire world. Eventually, he's allowed art supplies and a radio, but only religious programs. Is keeping someone in a lit cell 24/7 with no human contact torture or necessary security. Then, in 1987, something bizarre happens during a prison riot. Cuban detainees riot at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. They take over 100 staff members hostage. As a good faith gesture to the FBI, the Cuban detainees release Thomas Silverstein from his isolation cell. For a brief moment, Silverstein experiences human interaction, sunlight, movement. Then the FBI takes him back into custody. He's transferred to Leavenworth, Kansas, to something they built specifically for him. They called it the Silverstein Suite. Leavenworth prison officials built a special isolation unit just for Silverstein. Inmates and guards called it the Silverstein Suite. A video-monitored, windowless cell with a bunk, desk, shower, and toilet. Remote-controlled access to adjacent recreation areas about the same size as a cell. The lights stayed on 24 hours a day. 2 surveillance cameras followed his every movement, 7 days a week. His outdoor recreation area measured 17 feet by 14 feet, sealed by 20-foot-high concrete walls topped with bars and wire mesh. For 18 years, this was his home. If you were Silverstein, would you rather die or live like this? But the Bureau of Prisons wasn't done with him yet. Silverstein is transferred to ADX Florence, Colorado, the federal Supermax prison, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He's placed in Range 13, the most restrictive housing in the entire federal prison system. An 80-square-foot cell, 23 hours a day locked inside. 1 hour to exercise in a cage. Soundproof walls. No windows. No human contact. This is where Thomas Silverstein will spend the next 14 years of his life. And what it does to his mind is documented in his own words. This is where you'll see what isolation really does. But first, hit that like button and comment. Is solitary confinement torture? Now let's read what Silverstein wrote about his own mental state. Silverstein described solitary confinement in his own words. Drip, drip, drip. The minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years constantly drip away with no end or relief in sight. He called it a slow, constant peeling of the skin, stripping of the flesh, the nerve-wracking sound of water dripping from a leaky faucet in the still of the night while you're trying to sleep. Comment. How long could you survive in total isolation before going insane? The United Nations says solitary beyond 15 days is torture. Silverstein endured 13,000 plus days. What prolonged solitary confinement does to the human brain. Hallucinations, visual and auditory. Severe anxiety and panic attacks, memory loss, and cognitive decline, depression, and suicidal thoughts, inability to gauge time, paranoia, permanent psychological damage. The United Nations classifies solitary confinement beyond 15 days as torture. Thomas Silverstein, 13,140 days in solitary. That's not punishment. That's systematic psychological destruction. But here's what makes Silverstein's case even more disturbing. Despite 36 years in isolation, Silverstein never had another disciplinary infraction. No violence. No rule violations. Perfect behavior. He practiced yoga, meditated, studied Buddhism, took anger management courses. He watched television, wrote letters, drew artwork, crocheted. He eventually expressed regret for killing guard Merle Klutz. He wrote, "I just have more self-control now, after 25 years of yoga, meditation, studying Buddhism, and taking some anger management courses." He became a relentless critic of the BOP and solitary confinement. The man had changed, rehabilitated himself. But it didn't matter. He sued the government, arguing his conditions were unconstitutional. Silverstein filed a civil rights lawsuit seeking to end his isolation, arguing it violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. District Judge Philip Brimmer ruled against him, saying his conditions were the same as other ADX inmates. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. 3 decades of solitary did not violate his constitutional rights. The courts decided, this is not torture. This is legal. Do you agree with the courts, or is this clearly torture? So Silverstein went back to his cell and waited to die. February 2019. Thomas Silverstein falls ill following heart surgery. He's transferred to St. Anthony Hospital in Lakewood, Colorado. His first time outside a prison in 36 years. Even incapacitated and intubated, BOP guards initially kept him in 4-point restraints tied to a hospital bed with 3 officers standing watch. Hospital officials told callers there was no patient named Silverstein. Get well cards were returned undeliverable. May 11, 2019. Thomas Silverstein dies at age 67 from complications related to heart surgery. 36 years in solitary. The only escape was death. And before he died, even his jailer admitted the truth. After Silverstein's death, Norman Carlson, the federal prison director who issued the total lockdown order, sent an email. He conceded that his treatment in prison had been cruel. The man who ordered 36 years of torture admitted it was cruel. But he added, without the death penalty being an option at the time, however, there were no viable alternatives to dealing with Silverstein. Translation: we tortured him because we had no other choice. But was that true? What could the Bureau of Prisons have done instead of 36 years of torture? Option 1. Transfer to different Supermax facilities periodically. Prevents adaptation to torture. Option 2. Limited supervised human contact. Prevents total psychological breakdown. Option 3. Mental health treatment required by law for prisoners. Option 4. Review after 10 to 15 years. Reassess based on behavior. Option 5. Life in maximum security with some privileges. They chose none of these. They chose torture. What would you have done with Silverstein? There's no easy answer. And Silverstein isn't the only one. ADX Florence houses approximately 335 inmates. Among them, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, Boston Marathon bomber, Ted Kaczynski, Unabomber, died 2023 Ramzi Youssef, 1993 World Trade Center bomber, Terry Nichols, Oklahoma City bombing, El Chapo, Mexican drug lord, going insane, Larry Hoover, Gangster Disciples founder, all in 23-hour-a-day isolation. For decades. Some for life. Roughly 80,000 people are held in some form of solitary confinement in the United States. So here's the question that haunts everyone. Thomas Silverstein killed 3 people. One was a prison guard just doing his job. Does that justify 36 years of psychological torture? The argument for, he murdered a guard. There has to be supreme punishment. Other inmates need to see consequences. The argument against, he was rehabilitated. Perfect behavior for 25+ years. The UN calls it torture. Even his jailer admitted it was cruel. Both sides have a point. That's what makes this so difficult. Silverstein himself said, it's almost more humane to kill someone immediately than it is to intentionally bury a man alive. Was he right? And here's the question you need to answer. Thomas Silverstein's story forces us to confront an impossible question. Where do we draw the line between justice and torture? Is there any crime that justifies 36 years of total isolation? If Silverstein changes, rehabilitates himself, shows remorse, does it matter? Should punishment be about deterrence? Rehabilitation? Revenge? Craig Haney, legal studies director at UC Santa Cruz, noted that solitary was largely abandoned in the 19th century because it was doing more harm than good. Yet today, 80,000 Americans sit in isolation. Is this who we want to be as a society? Was Thomas Silverstein's 36 years in solitary justice or torture? Thomas Silverstein was born February 4, 1952. He died May 11, 2019, after spending 36 years in solitary confinement, the longest in Bureau of Prisons history. He killed 3 men. He paid for it with 13,140 days of isolation. He wrote, "Drip, drip, drip, the minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, constantly drip away with no end or relief in sight." His only escape was death. Was this justice? Or was this torture? The courts say it's not torture. The UN says it is. His own jailer admitted it was cruel. You decide. Because if we can't answer this question about one man, how can we justify doing it to 80,000 others? Thomas Silverstein's nightmare is over. But ADX Florence is still open. The concrete boxes are still full. And the question remains, is this justice or something far worse? That's the story of Thomas Silverstein and life inside ADX Florence. If this made you question everything about punishment, hit that subscribe button. We cover the cases that force you to think. Justice or torture. And check out our other prison documentaries. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.